the reason of this podcast is really simple. I think there is so much excitement to know who you are as a person, because what we see today is the tip of the iceberg. There is so much behind the scene and what you've been living. We were talking off of cameras about it. Like, we are in this industry for a long time.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do is to unfold who is Ryan, Mr. Lyan.
Yeah.
And you could take us through this path, this journey, from where you're coming from and everything else, until today.
Sure.
When we arrive to your place and what you do today, for me, the podcast is can end there.
Okay, got you.
You get the
I'm
point.
totally with you, yeah.
And the reason why we're doing this is because we believe in this industry. They don't need to know, who is Ryan. Everybody knows. But it's trying to find themselves. Maybe there is a little part of your experience that is resonating with them, and it will inspire and will motivate this industry. That's the whole reason why we're doing this podcast.
Sounds great. I also think, it's always great to hear about somebody's kind of journey to something, because there's elements of it where they're making their own. It's kind of channeled into the work that they currently do. And that can happen for everybody, right? Like, it's all about doing things that reflect your own personality, your interests, and kind of funnel all of the things that you think are exciting about the world. And that comes from your background. So I always love hearing about how people have got to where they are, because it tells the story of their expression and what they're excited by.
I'm obsessed about it.
Yeah.
I want to know everybody's story.
Yeah.
And more I do this podcast, starting with Agostino, Giorgio, Remy, Eric, and, Noel Venning, like, there is a little part of myself that is resonating with them.
Yeah.
I don't know how that can be possible from different countries, but there is something that is connecting you to them.
Well, I think that's also the beauty of our industry, right? You've got lots of people coming from so many different backgrounds, so many different, cultures and journeys, but we are all connected by that outlook.
Yes.
And I think there is something that has made us all kind of remain or be attracted to this industry, because there is that kind of similarity and maybe slight psychosis about, like, going. There is something a bit obsessive, I think, about our industry. And I think there is that kind of commonality. It doesn't matter where people have come from.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and what sparked your curiosity to start in the hospitality business.
Well, I think my journey into it didn't really necessarily start with purpose about going, this is where I want to go. And I think that's also quite a common story. And if I think back to what my interests were, now it makes total sense. And I look at this world and I go, I couldn't have done anything else. But it was never planned in that way. I think my journey into it was a little convoluted. And, if I think back, food was very important to me kind of growing up. It was a big part of our kind of family life, but drinks weren't really. I grew up in Birmingham. I had 2 Sri Lankan parents. They didn't really drink, but what they did do was kind of use food as a way to socialize. And my mum's such an amazing cook, and my dad's very, very social. And you kind of see these ways. And we were tiny kids. We were helping out in the kitchen. We had to learn how to do these things. If you ever go to a Sri Lankan household, there's always a cake around. And, my mum taught me that, it's such an act of love to be able to make something for somebody rather than kind of just go and buy something off a shelf. Or, we'd have to make kind of cards for our friends when we were growing up, their birthdays for Christmas. And if it was somebody's birthday, she would make a cake. And it was not only something that she was really good at, it was seen as a necessity to her. And I think that kind of really got kind of instigated into us. So we were taught to cook from a very young age, and, again, in a practical way. And I think that kind of guided a lot of the way that I think about, how we set up bars, how we set up our procedures. We had to clean as we go. I look at people now when they, haven't come from some of that kind of professional background, and you watch them kind of go around a kitchen and you're like, oh my God, this is a disaster. Friends who aren't part of the industry, you see them cooking at the end of the kitchen. It's like a bomb's gone off, right?
Get out of my home.
Oh, 100%. There's like flour everywhere, and you're like, oh, you don't need this. So we were taught that it was a social kind of tool. Food was a way to bring people together. And, we were taught to be curious about it. We would, We were able to have our preferences, but we were always encouraged to try something new. And I think that curiosity was kind of a big part of it. We didn't actually travel lots as kids. We didn't go to lots of fanciful restaurants. It was never like that. But we were taught to be very kind of practical and frugal with what we had, but also to, be open-minded about it. So I think that was a very key point of kind of childhood growing up around kind of food.
And that it takes you into spark your interest into ingredients, I guess.
Absolutely.
And then how develop from there. So this is the early stages.
Yeah.
And from there, have you been work as a chef or professionally or not? Or you've been following a different path?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, I grew up cooking a lot, and then it was a big part of what I knew I loved. And I had my place to go to, come actually to London to go to art college. And in that kind of gap between, I knew I wanted to do something practical. So I enrolled in the catering college to train to be a chef. And I did that because I just loved cooking. It was something that we all did. We used that as a way to look after our friends when they came round. We were, even as kind of youngsters, we're very adept in the kitchen. We could look after ourselves. I think that was a very big thing for our parents. It was food is a social thing, but you have to be able to do it. What else how are you gonna survive in the world if you can't cook? Which is ironic because my dad can't fry an egg. Like he's a disaster, but
It's lucky he got your mom.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. No. He was very well looked after. He was good. He was practical in other ways, but he can't cook. But it was a big thing for us to kind of know those things. But I wanted to learn the kind of practical side of it. How do we learn the kind of the methodology of a kitchen? And so I went to this catering college. It was great to be able to kind of dive into that side, learn the professional kind of aspects of it. And there's bits of that I still hold to this day: the order, the mise en place, the preparations, the cleanliness, but the sense of timing. All of those things were amazing lessons, and the way that you need to work in kind of unison with everybody around you. So I was kind of working as a kind of trainee chef. I was working in some kitchens around Birmingham where I was kind of growing up at that time. But I found the kitchen very alien. I loved all of the order of it, but the way in which you interacted with each other, it was very classical French training, brigade. We had that kind of, very shouty chef who would tell, throw the pan against the wall if you didn't turn the potatoes right. And, those cliches. And, I found that a little bit amusing, but I found it strange about the way that we, were interacting. It wasn't the way that I cooked when I was with friends and with my kind of family, but it also wasn't the way that I would create something for somebody. The wonderful thing to me is when you have friends around for dinner or you're making a cake for somebody or something like that, you think about that person and you have that knowledge to be able to connect something that feels special to them. And working in a professional kitchen, it was really strange to me that there was this kind of sever between that. Of course, there's the front of house staff who are interacting and they're bringing to life and all of those things. I got a little bit of an insight to that, but still the act of creating felt very disconnected to me. And it was actually my oldest friend, and I definitely think he said it as a joke, but he was like, well, if you love all these ingredients, you love these stories of all these flavors, but you want to talk to people about it, why don't you just go work in a bar? And I was like, great idea.
You click in 1 second.
Yeah, and it was almost like a light bulb moment. And, I don't know if you found this as well, but so this was 2002, so it's a while ago.
Oh,
I was going to bars and there was a couple of cocktail bars around Birmingham at that time. And I tried to go in and go, well, I'm really interested in this. I'm working as a chef. I'm still working in kitchens at the time. And said, but I think the kind of bar side would suit me a lot better. And they were very unwilling to take me on as somebody brand new to it. And they were like, well, to come and work in a cocktail bar, you have to have worked in a cocktail bar. I was like, well, how does that work?
how can be possible?
Yeah.
That is a usual thing that happened to all of us.
Totally. It's this, and I get that a lot of people end up doing it and I think it's a great way to learn it is if you start, collecting glasses or you work in a pub or a local place and then you get into more of the cocktail side. But I basically blagged my way in. I said to one of these bars that I said, I know you're going to come up to the Christmas period. It's going to be really busy. If I can learn all of the things that you have for your tests and I can pass the test before it gets to the training period that you'd need for Christmas, would you take me on? And they were like, okay, I mean, it's all on you, but you have to, if you're willing to do that, then yeah, that's a great way for us to agree to this. And I thankfully aced their test. I think for that time, I think it remained the highest mark in the company for a while.
Oh,
I'm a nerd, right? Yeah, and it was exciting me to learn all of these things and to learn about like different categories. I was in Birmingham, you get exposed to drink quite
How
young.
old you were then?
I was just turned 18.
Okay, perfect time.
So legal to work in a bar, but I'd been drinking and I knew a bit about alcohol. Like again, my parents didn't really drink, but they, I think, got fascinated by some of these stories where somebody would bring us back something from somewhere and my dad would quiz us on it or anything like that. And, as a biologist as well, I think it resonated with me it's a natural kind of creativity, right? Like it's an expression of nature. So I think all of that kind of made sense to me. So I kind of dove into this kind of information kind of head first and loved it. Like it just instantly clicked the moment I stepped behind the bar, and I was a bar back. I was there to be able to kind of help put all of this together and be the engine for it, and it just felt so electric to me. I just instantly fell in love with it.
It's meant to be the place
Yeah,
that you had to be.
yeah. Well, I mean, still, I think at that time I was just going, this is the most fun I've ever had. I definitely was just going, well, this is an incredible energy. All the people I'm working with are amazing. These products are so fascinating. It was a tequila bar in Birmingham in 2002. We were pouring Porfidio. Oh no, El Tesoro. We're pouring El Tesoro, which is
Okay.
mad to think about now. And we had all of these products that I think you'd still struggle to find in like a good agave bar. And it's crazy thing is 22 years ago. And we had, and nobody was drinking those in Birmingham. It was such a hard sell to get somebody to drink 100% agave tequila, let alone some of these really fine ones. But it was amazing crash course, and it definitely kind of like ignited my love for the energy of the industry. But it was only, I think, when I'd been working through other bars and I jumped through everything from kind of like nightclubs, which was super fun, taught me loads, made me kind of think differently on the way that I could serve. Worked in fine dining and, had a very different style of service and a discussion point with guests. I worked kind of every position, back of house, front of house.
Try to understand, I guess, whatever is the overall business of hospitality, no?
It's exactly that.
And I've got a question. Like you said, I'm a biologist. So what does that mean? That meanwhile you were working the bar, you were studying as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about.
Yeah. I think it was.
Because I knew you were a chemist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I jumped around a lot of studies. So when I first went to London, I was working in this nightclub, and it was a really dangerous situation where it was right near my art college. So I was studying fine art, going to work in this kind of club that would start at 4 o'clock and end at 4 a.m. You break down the bar, and then a couple of nights we'd stay and have some drinks. I was like, I've got to go next door to college. And you're like, oh no, this is not a good situation. It's super fun, and it's the things you can do when you're 18 years old, but probably not the most kind of practical thing to be able to tee up either my work or my kind of like art school life. But
so you have a little bit of arts in you.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think I was always interested in doing both sides. To me, they were the same thing. And when I was leaving school, the two major ones that I really enjoyed, I thought it was going to be arts. I had this focus to go do it. I was coming to St. Martin's in London to go to art college. But I also had this kind of science side, and it always frustrated me that they were seen as different. I saw them as exactly the same thing. Same with like, creatives and strategists. Any of these divides, I'm like, life is both of these things. You can't separate them into one side or the other. Everybody has an element of both in them. And it's obviously sometimes you have a very distinct lean towards one of those sides. To me, they were the same thing. I was like, arts and science are one. So when I was at art college, I got a bit frustrated that I wasn't getting to express some of my more, I suppose, scientific or methodological, I can't even say that word, side of things. And I kind of knew I wanted to kind of explore that. And I was really lucky. My art tutor was incredible, and she basically was like, listen, you'll always have your creative expression. Don't worry about needing to be in a formal situation to do that. And if you want to be an artist, you can still do that, having gone and studied something else. She had come the other way. She went from academics to arts. And she said, well, just, you need to get this out of yourself. You'll be frustrated if you don't. So that's when I made the move to Edinburgh. So studying biology, then I did philosophy and my master's in philosophy up there. And to me, it was about understanding the systems of it. I loved some of the rigor of kind of the scientific methodology. But when I came to kind of doing philosophy, I expected it to be one way. I thought it was going to be about. I originally studied philosophy of art and music, and then ended up going down this rabbit hole. And my master's was in social contract theory, so completely different. But I realized that all of these studies were about exactly what you talked about, how people come together. It's the idea of what makes us kind of social. And that to me was what I was always interested in people. That's what I found fascinating. And I loved going through those studies. I really enjoyed being a kind of university. But I think it definitely can get quite indulgent. I was in uni for a long time. I mean, I worked full time during it. I was like full-time uni, full-time work. And it was kind of really amazing to me to kind of lead these dual life where my work could kind of flow into my studies and vice versa, because it was about trying to understand people.
And I have to say that I'm absolutely impressed to keep the life in the bar and the life in the university. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't know how you manage it. For how long has been this?
Oh, I did that for full-time studies and work for 7 years.
Whoa.
But I think this is why, like, I then entered this system of going, I sleep 4 hours of sleep a night. That's my, like, way of working, because I got excited by, being in bars and that kind of evening social side. But then I also was just amazed by being around people that were, really passionate about exploring a topic and teaching and like being able to learn from all these incredible people. So I was like, well, uni's exciting too. So I just led both concurrently, and I liked running full pelt at both of those things. I felt like it was, that to me wasn't draining because I was energized by both sides of it.
Nice. I've got a question, super clean and neat.
Yeah.
Now, you've been telling me a little bit like what has been your path. I mean, I can see the fact of being in a family where the mother and the father really make the socialized moment so important.
Yeah.
For kids, it's like the best.
Yeah.
Because that moment is part of fun.
Yeah.
Then you develop some skills as a chef. Then you go through your passion, which has been the first passion has been like art, or the second one after cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're like, but I'm really driven for scientific studies, right? So at this stage of your life, what you're really passionate about?
It's a really good question. And I think the thing that I realized, and it was only later on into kind of working in bars, I was like, this is what it's about. I knew it was about people, and I knew it was about like ways in which I could bring people together. But it was only later on when I've been working in bars that I realized that this is the balance of creative and scientific expression. It is all the things that I find kind of interesting of kind of why are people coming together? What happens when they mix and, interact and socialize? But it also kind of tapped into more of a fundamental thing, as I talked about with, my kind of upbringing. It was this idea of looking after people and creating something for them. And I think there was this magic that happens. And I think everybody gets this when they're working in the hospitality world. You have that moment where you've made somebody's night and they didn't know that's what they needed. They didn't know what was going to trigger it, but you can tell. And sometimes they'll say it and they'll be like, that's the best night out of my life. But other times you just kind of, you can see it as an expression. You can see it as a reaction. And you realize that you've done something that is like fundamentally made somebody's life better. And it might be momentary, it might be a permanent memory, it might be any of those things, but there's something really beautiful about knowing that you've been able to do that without making it about yourself. It's not then that you're going, look at me, I've done this, look how clever I am. It's just, it's an infectious feeling. And that was the point to me in which it really crystallized that this is what it was about. It was about all of these expressions. I get to be myself. I get to be able to kind of create something as an expression of a creative output that feels very personal. But actually, it's about making these moments for people that, fundamentally make people feel better about themselves. And, that would, to me, I was like, well, why else would I do anything in the world? Like this is what interests me. This is what makes me feel good. And I get to kind of have my own voice and express myself. It was, that was the point where I was like, well, this is the only thing I could do, and I want to do this until I die.
I mean, there is nothing else I can say about it. It's the holy grail of our hospitality,
Yeah.
I guess. The fact that a guest he feels good about the experience, about the people around, about
Yeah.
the overall journey that you build for them is just like, he makes you feel like go sleep, like I've done my thing. I've
Yeah.
done my thing. So
And I think in a very human way, it's like one of the most satisfying things.
yeah,
And of course people have this in other ways. I'm sure being a parent must be, you see those moments where you're like, I've looked after this person, I've created something for them, and you get it in other moments in life, but the fact that we then get to do that as our day to day, that's what the
yes.
focus of what we get to do. That's where it feels really, I don't know, there's something really nice about going, well, that's the purpose of what I get up for.
Yes, yes. And this that you just said is lead me to a following thoughts. It's like you told me about what you're passionate, and then please, like between me and you, how would you define success? We have different vision. All of
Yeah,
us, success is so different
totally.
and prioritize in different ways,
Yeah,
different stages of life.
yeah.
What is success for you?
I think success for me is freedom. I think where you have the ability to express yourself in the most honest way. That is what we're all kind of striving for, right? Everybody wants to be able to have autonomy over their world. They want to be able to make a difference. And I think where you get to the point where you're able to truly express yourself, you're able to do things that kind of connect and feel meaningful, and that might just be to you, but that's really powerful. And I think, of course, other traditional markers of success help enable that. I mean, if you money's never been the motivation for me, but if you're richer than God, I suppose you're able to have freedom as part of it. But I think it also distorts. So the true part of, I think, what is kind of key to success is where you have the ability to you have the freedom and the ability to express yourself.
Impressive, impressive freedom. It's really nice to see that more we get along with those podcasts and we see this melting pot of personality, right? And each of the personality has a different point of view.
Uh-huh.
But, it's really reconnected to the humanity, If I will answer that question, I think for me, the success, it's kind of similar to what you said, the freedom for sure. But the love, like love given to someone else is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
But as we said, different stages, different personality,
Yeah.
different thing. It's unbelievable. And how do you pursue your purpose on be free, like in this super high paced? I mean, you have a super fast paced life.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, for me, success is freedom. How do you combine and balance the two? Because it's a tough one, right?
It is, and I don't know if I have the answer to that as such, but I think, it's still about kind of what motivates you around it, because, you're absolutely right. I think that moment of love is, again, it's fundamental to what we do, right? Like, I think that's such a key aspect of what we're creating is in hospitality, right? And so a big thing, and we've used this as like a pillar of the Lion Company. We talk about the fact that we want to do good things, and we've left that kind of purposefully quite open and vague, and then we use it in the titles of stuff. But it's really about going, well, that's the goal. Like, the balance is always going to be hard, but if we're trying to weight it, that it does good. And we put people at the heart of our company, so making the team members have that freedom, that sense of autonomy. But if we're all kind of unified by this idea of going, whatever we're doing, wherever we can, let's just try and do good, then that's going to, it just gives us a better sense of balance. So when we are running around, and that, sometimes that feels exhausting, but if you know that what we're trying to do is positive, and that's across the board. Yes, you talked about the sustainability being kind of heart central towards the company. That's part of good, but the same is, getting more people to understand what we do as an industry, or being able to make sure that our industry has longevity or bridge it into new places, all of those things are also good. And so it's kind of going, how do we always kind of steer towards that course of going, let's just try and put more positivity out into the world than we can, because that's what the world needs, right?
Absolutely, positivity. One of the things that always are fascinating me about people that create concept ideas, make the dream alive, like, I guess having a company with so many places and concept labs, and for you is like, this is what I want to do, right? And it always fascinating me, and it makes me feel like, how did you came across from your experience to this, like,
Mhm.
what
Yep.
has been the step, is like, that is the point that I switch from this to that.
Do you mean jumping through the different projects?
Yeah.
I mean, I always knew that we wanted to have a wide diversity of things, because the beauty of food is it can be expressed in lots of different ways, and you want different things at different points and in different situations. And it was exciting being able to go to new countries and learn and try and be part of that kind of space and culture. So I think it was really, in a way, it's kind of easy to jump into any of these new topics or focus that any of the projects have, because you just switch to going, well, that's what this this particular project, it might be a bar, it might be a idea, whatever it might be, that's what it's trying to address. Everything's got a very clear focus in terms of the everything that's within the kind of family of projects. Everything has its own lane, and so being able to jump into it is going, well, we knew we wanted to do something different. So take Amsterdam, very different culture, different to what we'd grown up in London. We purposefully wanted something that was for Amsterdam, but it could also feel very different. We wanted something that was like playful and light, and could kind of like have this different energy to it. So that's exciting for us, but it also feels relevant for that audience. We're not trying to do it in a way where we're just going, here's what we did in London, we're going to plug it in here. And then the same is when we're working with a different market or opportunity. If we're working with Mr Lyan Studio, where we're working on a strategy project and we're thinking differently and we're trying to understand what does that mean for a very different audience, that's exciting, because you have to switch your thinking, that it's within what we are as bartenders. We all kind of address different needs for a different guest, and you'll instantly switch from being formal with this guest who wanted something different to being way more playful for another. And I kind of treat it the same thing, as going, as long as we're understanding what the actual question is, what's the need of that particular project, it's easy to switch kind of like lane and jump into what's needed for that. And actually, I enjoy that a lot. Just, having multiple creative projects, spinning the plates and going, right, for this one, we're looking at this and we want to throw a party, and it's going to be this energy to it. And this going, well, that we're working with this fashion brand and it needs to have a very different tone of voice and kind of creative expression to it. And being able to kind of go through those two completely different projects seamlessly is because I think it's what we do as bartenders. It's central to the way that we think, and I'm really glad that we've been able to have this diversity of project to be able to kind of really reflect what I think is, that's really kind of key to our skill set as kind of creatives.
Jumping from one side to another,
Absolutely.
is like, that's what it is. From your words, is really transparent one thing, that you are creating culture in a way in all your different projects, because you said a key word. You said, like, it's not just a project, it's not a format that we just standardize. It goes here, it goes here, it goes here. It's not a pret-a-manger.
Totally.
We try to understand, how do you do that? I mean, creating a culture is already difficult, but
Yeah.
how do you create multiple cultures?
Well, I think it's, food is culture, and I think it's taught us to notice some of those like little differences. And I think I think a lot of the way that we develop something is we do a lot of research, we deep dive into things. And I think that's a big part, is trying to understand what is actually there. And we want it to be relevant to that audience. So the more that we can understand something, the more that we can kind of look at what the need is. And sometimes that's, it's never fixed in one place, right? It's a changing thing. But the more that we can be clear about this is what it's trying to do, the more that we can then layer in a creative like response to that. So I think we do a huge amount of research. I think that's, if I think about what we do as a company, that's what we probably do the most time on is, we embrace the team's diversity. So we let everybody research from their own perspective. The things that I will go and kind of read up about are very different to, one of the new members of the team who's in DC. They're just going to look at things differently. They're going to come from a different background, and we embrace that. And so we'll encourage them and we'll support them on just going wide with the research, just so we can, as a group and as a collective, we can try and understand things the best we can to then be able to kind of create a creative response to it.
I love it. The way how you say, you've been saying we. And this is like, it's so important.
Yeah,
Because I strongly believe personally, creativity doesn't come from one person.
absolutely.
It's like something that has to be shared, the brainstorming, the ideas. And I think you are extremely great on that. I've been lucky enough to work with you for certain things, and I know the feeling,
Yeah.
I know it's like, oh, this it could be done like that, and it's so interesting. Now, how do you how do you do that? Like with your team, how does it work, the system in your environment?
A big thing that we do is make sure that everybody has a voice. I think we've always talked about the fact that we call them diecast rules of like the Lion Company, and there's basically one. And it's, of course, it's like everybody's joined by this idea of trying to do good things, and there's definitely an approach and a philosophy that we're all joined by. But as a rule, it's basically, it comes down to preference, and it was Ian and I, Alex and I, James and I, like all of the team members, we like if we shake it, we double strain it. And hey, that's literally it.
I love it. If we shake it, we double strain it.
And that's the rule. And then everything else is open to challenge, because a major part was going, if we want people to be central to the business, nothing should be sacred. If we've been doing things for a certain way, take Lioness, there's like 10 years worth of systems in place there. But somebody might walk in from a different background and go, why don't we just do this? And if we were dogmatically like staying true to these traditions, we're limiting our creativity, and we're not being kind of like responsive to the fact that the world is evolving around us. So we will talk to all the team members and say, if you think something's not right, you have the ability to challenge it. You could be brand new to the company. There's none of this kind of course, there's like leaders in the company, but there's no hierarchical thing. If somebody turns around and says, this doesn't make sense, their voice is a key part of the company. And so I think from that foundation, we kind of make it very clear to people that they're there to be themselves. We don't give them a script. We're not telling them to, when you go to a table, you have to do this. Of course, we put systems in, and we're very particular about trying to make sure that it feels special, and those team members are supported in it, but they're there to be themselves. They're not there to just follow along and kind of be part of a rigid system of stuff. And I think that then comes through in the creativity. We are giving them the keys to run away with it. They have ownership over the bar. It's always about a platform for them to be themselves, and everybody's involved. Of course, it's not like mandatory. It's not like you have to throw in a creative idea or anything like that, but everybody gets to be part of it, even if you're, as I say, brand new to it, or you haven't come from a bar background. We have people, we try and rotate it, that everybody works kind of bar floor, every role in the company, everybody kind of
Experiencing.
Absolutely.
He really opened up different opportunity for people. It's like, I can do that even myself. I'm gonna be there.
I think that's the kind of most exciting part. I think, the other thing in the Lion Company is you never inherit a role. So if you've just been there long enough, doesn't mean you become the next senior. Like it's much more about going exactly what you pointed out. If you get excited about something, we'll support you on it. And I think that to me was one of the amazing things I had as a young bartender. I had, great mentors, amazing people who gave me so much time and, information, but they could see what I got interested by, and they supported on it. And, that's what we want to be able to do is you never know what's going to excite you. You might go into a bar and all of a sudden realize that, the system side is what you find incredible and it just works for your brain. And, I think that diversity that we have in our industry is one of the reasons why it's like exciting. Is like anybody can find a point to be passionate about. And sometimes it's, it might be more of the traditional creativity stuff, or it might be creative expression by like developing new ways of working or organizing any of those things. And so we just try and like tee it up for people that they have that opportunity to grow into the areas that excite them.
Absolutely. And really, 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 really resigning with me this. And I think it's super, super essential. Um, there is a thing that it comes to my head, and then we're gonna jump into something else.
Okay.
But it's much more related to tradition and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, your team, you're really well known to pushing the boundaries of innovation further, like far as possible, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably a good thing. Um, from your side and perspective, do you think he must be a balance in between the traditional way to see drinks and this kind of like way of pushing the boundaries, or not? And if you want to tell me a little bit about.
I think it's crucial that there's two of those things in kind of unison, because we have hundreds of years worth of tradition. That's incredible. And if you work for the Lion Company, we drill into everybody the importance of understanding the classics. If you go to any of the bars, even though we do some of these kind of weirder, more kind of like I suppose unusual style of drinks, you could go into any of the bars and be like, I want a Negroni, or I want a Manhattan, or I want a Royal Bermuda Yacht Club. I'm going to pick an obscure classic, and it's the team will knock out an incredible version of it. And that to me is crucial, because you have to understand the traditions to be able to build on them. And I think a lot of people thought that because we try and work in this kind of modern way, we're like, oh, we throw away the classics, burn it all to the ground. And it's not that at all. It's just the fact that we live in an evolving world. We have to be able to offer a diversity. I love being able to go to these historic bars, having these classical drinks, connecting to this culture. That to me is some of the most incredible experiences you can have. But it should also be alongside other things. We should be able to offer a diversity, but we should also kind of look to not just fetishize the past. There has to be a respect for it, and there has to be a way to kind of maintain it. We don't want to lose those things. But if we dogmatically stick to it, we're ignoring the fact that the rest of the world has evolved around us. Products evolve, tastes evolve, language evolves. Let's make sure that we keep those traditions moving with us. And sometimes you see people sticking to rules for the sake of it rather than because they care about the traditions. And that to me is where it gets problematic, where, we've had people. I remember having a conversation with Sasha Petrasky about this.
Oh.
And, he was talking about the fact that, when he ushered in this like modern, and, it's just he revived this idea of caring about the kind of component things, the ice, the fresh squeezed citrus. But he was like, but people started applying that as a new rule without thinking about where it applies. And so sometimes you'd have people doing things. He's like, that's not what I was trying to talk about, or it's not actually the best expression of what it could be. That was a much needed, and it changed the world, right? What he and, other kind of like pioneers around that era changed for the, really brought our industry back into the kind of excellence it needed to have. But there also needed to be further evolution alongside that. I'm sure he would have wanted people to take that mantle and bring it on. And if you look at, all the Sammy and Mickey and all the people that are, carrying on that kind of baton, they're doing it in a way that still evolves around them. They're not just going, well, you just do this as the rule and you stick to it. They're understanding that, this was a great set of principles, a wonderful tradition to be able to uphold, but it's not about going, well, anybody else doing anything different to that, or, steering away from it a little bit is kind of breaking the rules. I think we need to be able to allow those traditions to be kind of respected, but we also need to make sure that we're allowing them to move forward with the world.
Do you think that storytelling is so essential?
I think storytelling's crucial towards what we do. That's what we are as creatures. And I think, again, this is where it's a good example in terms of the tradition aspect. It's wonderful to be able to learn those stories and understand where something has come from. And, you take some of those iconic drinks and they connect to a place, a people, a culture, a time. And that's just a wonderful story to translate. It means that it brings more people into our world. If you just give somebody a Negroni, they might be able to understand that balance. They might like the flavor profile of it. Great, that's a win. But if you're able to let them into that world and understand where it comes from, why there's this incredible back history of centuries worth of these incredible products being made, how it's very much part of a culture and a people, then they then kind of have this extra layer of appreciation to that drink. And they're able to engage with it on a different level. They want to tell their friends about it. And, that's where we get those kind of real moments of magic when, it demonstrates the food is part of our culture and they're the same thing.
Sure.
So I think the storytelling part is such a human part. It's such a opportunity for, really expressing what I think bartenders are really great at. But I think it's also the way to recruit more people to our world.
I see. I see. I see. Yeah, storytelling. I mean, as an Italian, we love storytelling.
Yeah.
I'm extremely passionate about it. And, I like to find the meaning behind everything. It's so essential. It's so important. And, it's capturing your attention, is the hook for anything you do. You've been talking about inspiring your team and how it works with your team. There is one thing that actually took my attention. He said, it's not a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is what you do is more like an ecosystem of individuals that contribute to the success of what you do.
Absolutely.
Or what the whole team does.
Yeah. I mean, it means that they all support each other. It was actually, if you think about, everybody's had that moment where they work in a bar team and it's just this wonderful kind of moment in time and everybody's like able to look out for each other. We just try and maintain that as an ongoing thing. We're very fortunate to have people that have been with us for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And, you want to be able to make sure as people, move on, go on to new projects, you're not losing that sense of togetherness. And the more that what we really try and do is this, create a culture where everybody's working for and with each other. And, that everybody supports each other. There's this opportunity for them to learn and kind of like balance different skill sets. But it means that there is this kind of like, as you kind of said, there's much more of this, like instead of a pyramid of things, it's much more of a kind of like unified team, and they're all pulling in the same direction. I often think about this in terms of, when we developed this system at Dandelion, and at the height it was, I think, 31 people. Lioness is just slightly under that now. But everybody would be involved in the creative project, and none of it was the old adage of too many cooks. Like, it wasn't lots of people trying to do different things. It was 32 people working together in harmony to pull in the same direction. And that's what we try and do in general. We do it from our creative process, the way that we work together is this kind of democratic system, through to, the systems of the way we work behind the bar. We operate like a pass system where everybody kind of crosses over and supports each other. And it means that it's a very, it's a strange system to walk into. I definitely think that anybody who's first started to work in any of the Lion bars, there's this moment, it doesn't matter how experienced you are, how many bars you've worked in, you kind of walk in and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. Actually, who was it? When we did one of the first guest shifts where we brought some people in, they were like, it's like a modern day tiki bar. I have no idea what's going on. Like, I'm putting stuff together, but I don't really understand the system. But once you get into it, you realize that everybody crosses over and supports each other. So you have multiple people checking a drink, you have multiple people helping put it together. So it means that speed's really high, efficiency's really high. You're not doing too many movements. You're able to support each other. But it's a really good reflection of the way that we work. There is lots of people supporting you. There's lots of different expertise coming together, but there's a crossover because you're all working for each other. And
I see.
it comes together in like the way that we, how tight the teams are. Like they socialize together.
Do you mentorship them with it, or it's just something that naturally has been happening since the beginning? Because what you are saying is it takes me and it makes me think, if the ecosystem he made with his team is like that, he's probably always been learning from somewhere, or someone teach him, some of your mentor. Maybe you want to mention any of them, or
like
it's something that you just develop, or it's been happening. How you call it? Impollination. I can't remember. You know, when the bees naturally just create things, but
cross pollination.
cross pollination. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly that influence. If I think back, like particularly from like Edinburgh days, Jason Scott and Mike Aikman from Bramble, but also Andy Gemmell, Ian McLaren, Craig Harper. They were such incredible mentors. And the thing that I think about, if I think back to that period in Edinburgh, there was so much education and togetherness as a scene. Like in that city at that time, you'd go and there'd be this amazing kind of like training system going on. All the bartenders would be there, be learning from each other. And that idea of like how you support each other as a community was a big influence on me. And similarly, when I used to go to my sister's office, so both my sisters are business partners, and they're not in the industry. Natasha has an innovation company. She's a designer by trade. Karen was in fashion. And, when we were starting the Lyan company, I spent so much time working in their offices or around them, and, seeing when I went to work in Natasha's company, just the way that they worked together, it was just this creative powerhouse, and the energy that around it was incredible. And I was like, that's such a infectious thing to be involved in. And I've always said, like we run long hours in our industry, right? Like it's hard. You're often in like away from lots of people, but it only becomes draining when you don't have that creative input or that energy of support from people around you. And I'm not saying that I want people to work just long hours, but there's a difference between long or unsociable hours and something that's draining. And I think what we tried to do was build that kind of system of support. And it was both from kind of that inspiration from mentors and business partners, but it was also from, the team members who were integral in building Lyan at the beginning. Like if you look at those systems, like, our first head bartenders, Ian, of course, was a huge inspiration in kind of like building this kind of mechanism. And we were all joined in the same mentality. We wanted this to work in a different way. And we'd all worked in other places where we're like, we don't want it to be like that, and, we basically tried to develop these systems, and each person added their own mark on it. If I think of all of the incredible, bartenders who've been involved in the company over the years, they've all left their indelible mark, and it's so wonderful watching what they've gone on to and do next and all those things. But all of them shaped that system. And it was going back to that point about everybody had the ability to input and kind of design and dictate the way that the bar and our company worked. All of them made their mark on it. So it was partly from inspiration from mentors, but it was huge part was the way that those bartenders shaped it and kind of created that new system.
Wow. I mean, it's impressive, but you can feel it from the words that is really transparent. Like this feeling of this ecosystem, this personality brings something on the table, because many places they have a different way to see things, especially maybe hotels, bars, or things like that. But
Yeah.
more I sit down in front of people, and more like I really can get what you're trying to do with your team naturally.
Yeah.
It's not like not organic, it's just happening. There is one little thing that I would like to talk about it, because back in the days this thing is like blow me away, and he was related more like a gossip thing. I think maybe you know what I'm talking about, but it was a Linus. At some point, I think there was a really important post by Jay-Z or Beyonce.
Oh, yes. Yeah, okay.
Please, can you tell us tell us everything? What happened that night? You were there. What's up? Because that thing is just like I was looking. I was like, I can't fucking believe it. Someone sent me a text, and I was like, I can't believe it.
I actually wasn't there. It was just
No
even
way.
more mad. So
So
it was,
tell us the place, the time,
yeah.
the people, everything.
It was actually White Lion, and
I White
it
Lion,
was
sorry,
White Lion,
yes.
yeah. And when we were opening White Lion, we were doing almost like a precursor test of Dandelion, because we developed the idea kind of in parallel, but we were working with whether, could we work in a hotel space and kind of like understand those systems and slot in what we were doing from kind of more of an East London kind of cocktail vibe thing. So we're doing this kind of collaboration in New York at the Hudson Hotel, and I was going back and forth, and we decided to open a bar at the same time in like London and New York, which was just such a nightmare in terms of the dynamic. Ian and I were, jumping back and forth a lot, but I I'd kind of flown out to New York, and I knew that there was the Beyonce concert going on, and kind of Karen being in the fashion world, she'd gotten some of our drinks to kind of Beyonce and the team, and they
Casually.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, Karen's a bit of a superstar, and she kind of works in that kind of the fashion world at that level. And I only found this out much later, because the actual way that I discovered it was I landed back from the red eye from New York, and I knew they'd been, the concert was going on, we were giving them some drinks, but I landed back and I had over 200 missed calls on my phone. And all of the text messages I had like this bombarded. I land in like London, my phone goes on and it just buzzes like nonstop, and it's like missed call, missed call, missed call, missed call messages. And all of them just say, call me. And so I'm convinced the bar has burned down. All I know, I'm like, right, something's happened.
Got on fire for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I finally get through to Ian. It's stupid o'clock in the morning. They close the bar late, and he just goes, Jay-Z and Beyonce came in, and then hangs up. And I'm like, at least I know that the bar didn't burn down. But essentially, they were at the concert. Karen and Natasha were there. They'd given them some of the cocktails. They go chat with them, and then Beyonce turns to Karen and goes, well, we want to come to the bar. And they're like, okay. So Karen calls Ian and says, you need to work out a way of making this subtle. You definitely can't post anything. Take phones from the team members. And so they turned up. They came through the back entrance. Security came through and checked it all, and they took over the downstairs, which was always hilarious in White Lion, because it's where we threw some of our most raucous parties. We put a strip pole in there, right? Like it was, it was a very fun space. And, White Lion was always about trying to have this kind of energy to it and, redefine what a cocktail bar could look like. And, they came in, she drank the Moby Dick Sazerac all night and some of the beeswax old fashioned, and, jumped on the pole, all of these things that, had this like apparently super fun night of it. And then all of these photos started coming out. We got kind of calls in the tabloids, and, they obviously,
Massive. It was massive.
yeah, it was always amusing where you start to see what tabloids exploit, because, we had the bone dry martini at White Lion. And so one of the lines was, oh, Beyonce goes behind this bar in East London, is stirring martinis with bones. And we're like, what? And then drinking the Sazerac, which has ambergris in it, which is, kind of like a whale furball. But again, tabloid headline, Beyonce drinks whiskey with whale sperm in it. And we're like, oh God.
What the
Man,
heck
you-
is
but
that?
Then you start to realize the kind of, I suppose, the kind of power of those kind of individuals. But they were amazing, and they were very supportive of the bar, and were very complimentary of it. And I think it was it was right at the early days of White Lion, where I think people were still trying to understand what it was and whether it was good, and, was it something that made any sense. And I think it was such a powerful thing to have, the two biggest names in music at that point just kind of coming through to kind of endorse it. And, there was those lovely moments, I think, because it was such a weird bar, those kind of things. I mean, actually not long after that, we had Bjork in, and she came in for some drinks with Jefferson Hag from Days and Confused, and also just had a great time at the bar. And actually her PA called up like later in the week and was like, "Oh, Bjork loved it. She thought it was really amazing as a space." She kind of asked if she could come and DJ. And we were like, "Are you kidding?" And I was like, "Well, next Sunday's our first birthday. Would she be keen for that?" And goes away, comes back, and she's like, "She would be honored to." And we were like, "Are you kidding me?" And like that was like a real pinch ourselves moment. And I think it still remains kind of one of my favorite things to do with, what we've been able to achieve as a company. But, that as a celebration of, really probably the weirdest bar in the world at that time. It was such an outlier to what else was going on in the industry, but to kind of see some of that support. And it's not about kind of like celebrity or it being about, look, this famous person did this.
Absolutely not.
It was just this lovely kind of, it was a turning point for, I suppose, that kind of group of people starting to recognize our craft and what we were doing and the diversity of spaces that were going on.
And I think like the perfect quote to describe this specific moment is be ready and stay ready.
Oh, 100%.
Because that's what you've been doing. Like
Yeah.
you've been just performing, doing your
Yeah.
stuff as best as you could, and then the opportunity will come.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's not the most important point. The most important point is the concept, is the idea, is your team. That is just an endorsement. It's just like a gratification for you, for your team, for everybody around that been working so hard on this project.
100%. I couldn't have said that better.
And this is lead me to one of the best part, and I think we are on the closing side. So we're not gonna take much of your time. I think you expressed so many good point and concept, but it's like I would like to make a question which has the two sides.
Mhm.
Would you like to tell us one of the moment that has been one of the biggest failure of your career, and a little description of it? And after that is just like tell us a little bit what it will be the best advice that you will give to the new generation of bartenders, and learning from your experience or from your failure.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's been lots of failures, and I think it's really important to kind of recognize those, but also not dismiss them, because you learn so much quicker from failures than you do from, any of the other successes or kind of like highlights that you might come across. And, some of them I think were more kind of business orientated, where you realize that, you try and juggle too much, and you're then, of course you feel a responsibility as a business owner where you're, or a leader or whatever it might be, that you have to support people's livelihoods. You have that, you've got to take it seriously. But at the same time, I think there can be a bit of a blinkering to the fact that there's so many people who will help. And, it was a real key lesson to me when there was, really trying to juggle everything at a young stage. And I saw it as my responsibility to hold those keys, and then going, no, it's not about that. It's about making sure that everything works best for all of these people. So let's use all of the resources around us. Or at those points where you're like, let's just ask for help. And, that...
Which, as a bartender, sometimes you don't understand the concept.
100%.
I want to do everything.
Yeah.
I want to be the front of house. I want to be the bartender.
Yeah,
I want to be the barback. I want to be everything.
Yeah, I can be everywhere for it. And I think it's like, that was a crucial learning. I think...
And if you have a specific stories of failure?
I think when I told the team that we were going to close down Lyan, it was so clear in my head. Ian and I have been talking about it and going, we've achieved what we needed to do with this. It's all kind of getting to its right place. This menu is like the final kind of like exploration of this as a concept. Like, we need to be able to look at something that can continue to evolve. And so we've been having these discussions, and we've been putting these plans in place about what does it look like to go on to something next. But when we went and told the team, it was so clear in my head. It was so obvious. But I told them really flippantly. I was like, we're closing the bar. Like, some of them cried. And obviously it was the point of realizing that it is more theirs than it is mine. Like, it's so crucial to know that all the people that are working within this is a thing, that's their baby. And it's like that flippancy of kind of going, well, everybody's understanding what's in my head about this. Like, we've gone through the same journey, and they realize that we've got all of this other space to be able to explore. It makes sense to do this. But it was really insensitive. And, it made me realize it was such a failure of care. Like,
You felt it,
oh,
how they were feeling about your
I,
baby that
yeah,
become their baby.
I felt sick afterwards. I was just like, that was so disrespectful. And it should have been a point of energizing and excitement. And it was. Eventually, everybody was then like, wait, we still have our jobs. We're carrying on with these things. We've got something ahead of us. But it really was that was a failure of, like, all of the things that we talked about and wanted to be true to the company. It was an absolute failure of that. And
Don't you think that
about-
everything has an expiry date on? Everything we do and everything like we live, has a moment that, you have the peak, you have the magic. Sometimes you need to let it go.
Absolutely. And I think that was the reason with White Line and Dandelion was they were static, they were fixed, they were very pointed concepts. So it means that they absolutely have an expiry date. But you can leave things room for evolution. If you build them to be able to grow and change with the world, if your concept is flexible enough that it can kind of change as things move, and as long as you continue to move with things, you're not, like, that expiry date can shift. That's
Can
different.
shift. Okay.
So it's like, absolutely everything has its
Turning the milk into a cheese.
Yeah.
And you aging it, right? That's what it is.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to, as long as you're understanding that and you're looking at it, it's exactly that. You can a nice mature cheese.
Well, I've got something here. As you said about innovation and everything, are we putting together as we got along with our discussion? But then I had to ask to the artificial intelligence one question.
Sure.
So I simply ask, if you know Ryan, Mr. Lyan, which question would you ask him? And the artificial intelligence says, if you could distill your philosophy into a single drink, what would it tasted like and why?
Oh, damn, that's a good question.
What a question was that? I don't know how come up with it. I have no idea. But then when I said, no, this one is gonna be for him. So if you want, you can handle this. I will read it one more time. If you could distill your philosophy into a single drink, what would it taste like and why?
Okay, I'm gonna answer it from maybe a slightly different perspective, because it's a really, I think I need to
Absolutely.
dwell on, like, what is the real kind of, fundamental of our kind of outlook. But I think the drink that sums up so much of what we were trying to do is the beeswax old fashioned. It was one of the first drinks pre-Lion as it had been formed. And it's interesting to me because we've evolved with it. It's a drink that we kind of created because, honestly, I was always obsessed with honey. It was part of my biology projects. I was writing a paper on kind of social insects and, how they interact, and I found it fascinating, and all the products that came from bees. And so beeswax as an ingredient. And when we first created that drink, we actually blended our own scotch to kind of emulate old style whiskies. It was trying to kind of go blended scotch is an incredible ingredient. You shouldn't overlook it. And kind of realizing that some of these old blends had this, like, higher malt content, this wonderful fruitiness to it, lick of smoke that lifted everything out, but it was wrapped in this kind of incredible texture. And, particularly with White Line, where it wasn't going to have eyes, texture was a big point of what we tried to explore. And being able to kind of use beeswax as a component in that. And, it wasn't something that was kind of really seen in the food world at that time. When we started working with it, we then, had discussions with people like the Nordic Food Lab, where they were then starting to doing kind of like beeswax experiments. We're working with different apiarists of going, well, what is this as a component? Can we get different types of wax? All of these different things. And, from those early days of what it is as a drink to seeing now both, each of the bars doing their own expression of it, but we also put it on the masterclass series, where I never thought, it was just there to be a demonstration of some of our thinking. I never thought people would do it at home. It's a complicated recipe, but all of a sudden, it's the most used recipe on the masterclass series.
I'm gonna pick that.
Ah, and I loved that it demonstrated that actually people really will make effort for making drinks at home. They are excited by what's happening, not just within the, simple drinks they can make. And it was really indicative to me of what our mission was, which was to use food and drink to explore the boundaries of where our culture interacts, but find it as a way to just kind of bring more people together and have that kind of excitement around it. So it's, that to me is probably the drink that demonstrates so much of our philosophy.
What else I can say? Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. What a joy to be able to chat to you.
For real. Thank you.